Already know. Good. Evening and welcome to tonight's session of Ask the Farmer Q&A. This is the first one of this season, so we're delighted to welcome one of our newest ambassadors joining us this evening. Before we get started, I just want to tell you a little bit. I'm Bridget Barry. I coordinate Farming for Nature, and Farming for Nature was set up to inspire and encourage farmers that farm or wish to farm more for nature. And one of the ways we do this is each year we find exemplary farmers that are doing great actions on their land for nature. And we find ways in order to share their stories with others. Sorry there, I just have to turn off a... so we find ways to share their stories with others. So tonight is a way to learn from these farmers, to ask your questions. So I'll kickstart the event with asking our farmer tonight some questions, and then if anyone has any questions for James on the practical actions he takes on his farm for nature, please write them in the chat box and I'll facilitate them as we go on. If you've missed any of the previous sessions that we've done in previous years, these are all available to find on our YouTube channel. So Farming for Nature YouTube channel has all our previous Q&A sessions. Or if you have to leave early or know someone that would like to join this session will be up on our YouTube channel within the next 24 hours. So on to tonight's event. We're delighted to welcome one of our more recently awarded ambassadors, John Gilmartin from County Leitrim. And John runs a organic beef farm in North County Leitrim, of which he's the 7th generation. John, thanks. James, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, I'm out of practice. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. You're on mute, James, there. So,
not at all. Not at all, Barbara. Not at all, Barbara. Thanks for having me.
So before we get started, you might just give us an overview of your farm. What does it look like at this time of the year? We're obviously midwinter. And what's your system look like at this time of the year?
Okay, well, thanks very much for having us and you're welcome. And in fairness, poor Bridget has a sick child at home and she's up half the night, so I wouldn't blame her getting the name wrong there. But so hello to everyone, you're welcome. So my name is James Gilmartin, as Bridget alluded to, and I'm a 7th generation farmer, as far as I know, in North Leitrim, just outside Manor Hamilton, under the watchful eye of Benbow Mountain, which I'll talk about in a wee while. We have approximately farm with my dad. Now, my dad is 92 now. He was farming up until pretty much 89. He was feeding cattle and driving the tractor and all that and kind of keeping a fairly close eye. He still keeps a close eye on it, but just unfortunately, the last few years, since physically he's not able to get out and about as much as he would like. But he would still be a great advice to me on the farm, not just my dad. My mother obviously is a big impact on the whole farmer growing up, and my brother and my sisters and cousins, and obviously my wife now, my family. So it's a whole team effort is what I'm trying to allude to here. From a farmer point of view, we have a variety type of land type within the farming system and a variety type of land animals that we use on that. So it's trying to fit the land type that we have to the best practice that we can put on that to create a functionally economic sound model that can I suppose more than wash its own face and leave a bit after, but also be economically sound, environmentally sound, and socially sound going forward, that it's sustainable into the future. And there's a whole way of doing that. So as I said, we have farming under Benbow Mountain. We have about roughly 50 hectares altogether, of which 20 hectares will be access to commonage, which is a wet heat commonage up on the mountain, which is a very specific type of I guess, if you know the mountain, you know what I'm talking about. We're talking about like heather, sphagnum moss, a certain type of tree might be up there, especially at the lower parts of it. As you go up higher, there wouldn't be as much. It'll be very much like the topography of Mayo and them type of mountains in Galway and Donegal and that kind of an idea. There wouldn't be a huge amount of grassland on it, from like you would think, like some of the drier grasses, but it's still plenty of feeding capability up there at the right time of the year. On the lower part of the farm, then, the 30 hectares is made up of permanent grassland, some of it very good quality, that would have limestone ground in kind of veins that would be used for silage and for grazing animals during the winter time, sheep especially. And then we have some more peatland, and I mean, it's because of where we live, there's a lot of glacial deposition, so there will be different type, even in one field, there'll be a whole plethora of different types of soil type. So you're trying to work it the best way you can. I'm also an ag science teacher in a secondary school in Bundoran, and I'd be very passionate about that and try to fix or fit the models of farming that I do into kind of my teaching methodologies, because a lot of the students I'd be teaching in the school, you feel a duty to them to kind of, you're teaching about ag science, but a lot of the curriculum is very much based towards a certain type of farming, which isn't completely wrong, but it's the intensive production model, which won't always work in the areas that we live in. Well, it'll work with a lot of hardship on man, beast, and land. But yeah, so animals wise, we keep sucker cows traditionally and sheep. Um, and we graze them in a certain way. We keep just over the last 2 years, I've started some pasture layer poultry, producing eggs on the farm, which is a nice little extra bit of income coming into the farm. I have to get my statement in. I have turkeys as well this year for Christmas. And Connie was looking for healthy organic turkeys. I don't know if I mentioned we are organic as well across the board. I have 75 turkeys and I keep a few bees. And I've been very much into planting trees where I can, the right type of tree in the right place. I'm part of the acre scheme using different things that involves. And yeah, I suppose I better stop there because sometimes you start to talk and you're like, am I answering the question?
No, that's really interesting. You mentioned you have a kind of certain grazing for your sheep and your cattle. You might just explain that to us. What's your grazing system?
Well, it depends which type of sheep we're talking, which type of cattle. So in the cattle, I also have a small Dexter herd, which I use to graze on the wet heath commonage in the summertime because it's actually quite dry up there and there's a lot of foliage up there, a lot of stuff for the animals to eat. Probably not traditionally what would be thought to be healthy type of grasses, but believe you me, they go up and they go back fat. So it's about an extensive model over a big area. Uh, and I also use GPS collars on them. So they're called virtual no fence is the particular model, but there's a few different ones out there. And they're collars that go on the animal's neck. You fix a particular boundary on your fence, which is kind of, I suppose, the common is just about, I think it's 150 hectares or something. It's a massive area. You wouldn't be putting it as big as the whole commonage, but you kind of assign them to a certain part of the commonage. And then you would, you'd see if they cross out, you get a little identification to your phone. But the great thing about it is you train them before they go up. So it's like a bit like having a theoretical line, even though there's not an actual physical barrier up there. When they approach the theoretical line on the GPS map that you created on your phone, they'll get a beep. As soon as they hear that beep, they're trained to know that the beep is actually an electric shock. So they'll come back and they'll rarely cross it. Now, on occasion, they will, but you get a notification to say that they're out of the boundary. And because it's up in the comment, it's just no big deal. You can just see on your phone where they're going. And if you have to, you can get up and check it. Interesting enough, this year there's the National Parks and Wildlife funded or co-funded, and this year they've asked this is the year 3 of it. We've also started a study where we had a girl, a student, a young woman, I should say, not a girl, Ruby Harris was her name. She's from the University of Santa Barbara, and she's doing a PhD basically on looking at what cattle eat up in this type of commonage. And we divided it up into 3 areas. One had 4 Dexter animals in it. One area had just a control with nothing in it, and one area had 4. I suppose what would be more traditional, kind of like there's an Angus, a Shorthorn, and 2 Speckled Park, which is a composite breed of Shorthorn Angus and White Park, which came from Canada originally. But they're good hardy cattle that would be suited to the type of terrain that we have. And so I was just putting them up there as the farmer and seeing what sort of shape they came back in and what they were eating. She was up there for 6 weeks. Every day she had all these quad rats done out. She'd be looking at what they're grazing. She'd go in after the grazed, they'd look at it. She'd be collecting their poop. I have a, I have a freezer full of poop at home. My wife is kind of like, when's she getting this moved? But anyways, that's another kettle of fish. The turkeys aren't being stored in the same freezer, by the way. And
Keep the sales pitch up
yeah,
there.
so yeah, well, you look, you start, yeah, as a farmer, anyone that's a farmer, you have to be well, not so talented, but try your best at it in different fields.
Yeah.
Um, so that's the type of graze that goes on up there. I can
And
talk
is there
more
any
about it as
preliminary
well.
findings that the kind of the breeds that you have that are better suited to kind of the hill farming, or that they're
Well,
when
this is
when
year
you're
1 of
bringing
it.
them down? Oh yeah, but when you're bringing them down, do you see as the farmer
Yeah.
improvements
So yeah, I
improvements to
wouldn't
the
call it
land?
preliminary. I wouldn't call it preliminary findings per se, but looking at them, they come down and they're in great nick. I mean, they're in great shape. Like she'd be watching what they're eating. She actually seen some of them were eating holly, up there, and you're like, Holly, that's great. But if you know, and you'd be thinking it's not because they were hungry, believe you me. There's a huge amount of purple moor grass up there, and you mentioned about the land. So up there, it's all about sensitive grazing, right? So you've sphagnum moss up there in certain parts. You keep them out of that because sphagnum moss is really important for forming peat, and over time, and about carbon sequestration and drawing down carbon. And we're well aware of what that goes. All right. The purple moor grass and the heather, they're eating the heather, especially the crossleaf heather and the is it ling heather, I think it's called. So they're cutting that back, even by just trampling on it. They're knocking back because for a long time, mountains were overgrazed. Our particular wet heat would be undergrazed. So what happens is the heather actually starts to take over. It's a bit like rhododendron you see in some of these states where it just breeds, because there's nothing competing with it. So it's about managing it. Now, I'm not saying we've got it anywhere close to perfect, but it's going in the right direction. And also seeing what they're eating, going back to the heather, the holly, like they do eat other trees. You see them eating ivy, willow, all of these things. And that's like willow, for example. I do a wee project with my kids at school where you cut willow and dry it out, and people might or may not. Well, everyone knows should know in Ireland that the willow is the sally, but it comes from the name salix, which is Latin. Well, I think, and the main ingredient in the willow is salicylic acid. And you're like, well, what's the big deal about that? But if I want to go down to the shop and buy salicylic acid, I go down and ask for aspirin. That's what it is. So what the animals are actually doing is they're self-medicating. There's other anthelmintics in the food. In the iodine, for example, is in the ivy. There's a whole plant, like they know what to graze and they won't overgraze it. And then with the tree here, I give it to the cattle in the shed over the winter and they just lap it up. Um, so going back to answer your question, yeah, there is definitely a place for it. Now I couldn't be putting up 40 cattle. You have to do this tentatively. I'm the only person putting cattle up at the moment, and I only have a share of the commons. So if my neighbours, and hopefully they do want to be involved, you have to manage it that way as well. So it's about balancing it. And I kind of said in one of the videos I done for you, it's about taking what the land can give, but not what it can't give. Like you have to work with it. Like it'll give what you need. I'm a full believer in that. And it has done for millennia. It's just what we've started to do is take too much out of it. Sometimes it's kind of policy driven that people don't realize why they're doing it. They're kind of thinking, well, I have to make money. But at the end of the day, you have to leave it better for those coming after you, as it was done for me. So that's sort of what floats my boat.
So that's kind of interesting. Take what the land can give you. So, I mean, have you learned through trial and error your kind of land's natural carrying capacity, or is there any kind of top
Yeah.
actions or any advice that you give to people to know where the line is? I mean,
Well, you see, because farming, it depends, right? As I said, I'm a part-time teacher. Okay, well, I'm a teacher, full-time teacher, but I'm actually on part-time because I have job share because of family commitments with collecting kids and all the other things and I'm very fortunate to be able to do that. So I get to spend a bit more time on the farm than maybe a lot of people would who are out working and get their, home at 6 to feed the cat, sometimes to feed the cattle before they get to feed themselves in the evening.
mhm.
Um, so you have to figure why you're doing something. If you're a farmer, this is where I kind of and I feel sorry in many ways for dairy farmers in the sense sorry is probably the wrong word, but like they're following a model that is completely market based, majority of them, and it's about pushing production as much as you can. But that is a tipping point. But if you're at close to that tipping point, you're very close to going over it. Whereas what I try and do is just do it kind of extensively as much as you can, mind your own time too. That's a really important thing as well. Like if I'm trying to do all these different things and not time for other stuff, that's going to knock you off anyways. But to answer your question, just try it and error, but don't jump too far. You'll know yourself, like if it's causing damage. Like simply, if I had too many cattle up there, you'd see poaching, you'd see their condition wouldn't be great coming down. You just know what there's if you're a farmer, and you also need to slow yourself down and watch what's around you. Like look at the trees, look at the land, look at just take it in. It'll tell you, if you're doing it wrong. I mean, you mightn't be listening, but that's you should have known.
Yeah, observations key. Do you lessen your stock in the winter, or do you bring them all down? How do you manage your kind of winter
No,
stock?
so we are organic, and we've only went organic 3 years, though I will say we've been organic and everything, but just name. For as long as I can remember, the only thing that wouldn't have allowed us to be organic is spreading the fertilizer in the meadow because it was common policy to do that. But since I've gone organic, I don't spread fertilizer. And I guess the amount of bales I make might be down 15, 20, 15%, I'd say. But that's not a huge amount if you just take in a bit extra meadow or, again, it's about production. I said we're extensive. I could keep a lot more cattle on the land. definitely wouldn't have more money and definitely wouldn't have any time. You might know, it goes back to the tipping point. So anyways, no, I don't. So the cattle go into the shed. I had to convert the shed, a liveback area, we just converted into a dry area for straw because 50% has to be straw bedded or dry bedded, not straw particularly, but that's what we use. Though it's getting hard to source now this time of year because of the bad summer that was had. And then the dexters, they stay out all year round. So I think one thing with the dexters you do find that wouldn't be with the suckler farmer is you actually end up with more numbers, but they're quite light in ground because the value of you're not going to go to a market with a dexter weanling. Well, you can, but you'd be end up giving them away. You really have to bring them through to their second year and either go to the full distance with meat for them or sell them on as forward, and someone will make the last few quid on them. But yeah, so I don't cut back the stock particularly. The sheep I have cut back in numbers now. Again, the sheep, what I do, this is an economical and a time kind of a thing, but it's not really related to nature. But I think it's important if you're someone in my position or someone that may be listening, is I have two young cousins, or they're like my nephews, and they're sheep men. They love sheep, but they're both doing their ag degrees at the moment. So what I do with them is I let them run the sheep the whole year round on the ground. Now I would cut back from maybe 50 to 30 sheep, so there'd be more grass coming from cattle getting out earlier of the shed. And then they just get the money off the lambs. Now I'd have to pay tax on that normally, but what I do is I pay them as play one of them as an employee. It's his job, he gets whatever, and then it pays PRSI. But what it actually means is the money that you make from the sheep and a bit more, you're not paying your tax on it because people you have to make it economically sound. If I was like, I could just keep it all myself, but you'd end up paying over 50% tax because I have a part-time job. If I wasn't part-time or if I didn't have my job, then that wouldn't be it. But I do think there's a place for that on farms where if you have young kids of over 16, that they become employees and they have a vested interest in it and have an interest in it. Like I'm trying to encourage the boys, they've been selling them as regular sheep, like to the mart, but we're trying to get them to, let's build up a little bit of market and maybe we can sell them direct, like lamb boxes or whatever, and you make way more money doing it that way. And you have to start small, but you have to start somewhere.
So what do you sell direct to market? Do you sell your beef direct to market, or do you
No,
finish them? No,
no, I
you're doing
don't.
your
I,
dexters.
I,
Your
I don't
dexters,
with the
sorry.
dexters. No,
Yeah.
I've killed some, but not as a sales point because you need to remember to do all of these things. And I'm finding that with the turkeys. Did I mention I had turkeys for sale? I don't know. But anyways,
Interesting at this time of the year you mention it.
yeah, I don't do social media particularly because
Yeah.
what the social media it takes time. And
Yeah.
I don't sell, no, I do sell eggs direct, and it is a wonderful, like I have what's happened with the eggs are simple because you just go, you collect them. My young kids, they're 10, James is 10, Emma's 9, and Daniel's 4. And some of them always come with me to gather the eggs, and the hen isn't going to do too much damage to them. I might give them a peck or whatever, but they're not big animals, obviously. And so the safety thing there as well. And they're a lovely, that what you call kind of like there is a cost with it, but not huge. But you've already got to be market based there. So there's about 40 people buy the honesty box, and I literally can't keep it stocked. Um, so what happens is there you have 40 customers there, and most of them buying the herpes off me or whatever. Now I could get onto social media and I could start pushing it and I could start trying to, but always remember the bigger you get, takes your time. And
Mhm.
where's the balance, At
Mhm.
the end of the day, I'm happy enough where I am at the moment. But I'm down the line. I do have aspirations for next year. And I've spoken to a local lad in town, a local buyer or whatever you call it. He's got a cafe and a hotel and all, and he's a bit of space there. So what I intend to do is set up. Now I better be careful there because if I say it, I'll go and do it. But it's set up a little kind of a pop up shop using I suppose, a converted container. They're easy. I know a guy that has one on his farm who sells direct. They're about 35 quid to rent. The idea being it's an honesty system. I put my eggs into it. I'd probably maybe kill an animal when their time is right, fill it with, beef or whatever, beef burgers or whatever, but make it available that other people in the locality can provide it. So like have a cooperative model. It's
Mm.
simple enough, but your man's happy then to provide power to it and provide space for it because people are going to come in and go to his cafe for a cup of coffee or what. It just creates a good buzz. Now it'll take a bit of work to do it, but I think if it's up and running and you have a wee committee of 4 or 5 people that are interested in keeping it going, like the organic centre in Rosinver, who nominated me for the ambassadorship or whatever you want to call it,
Mm.
the correct terms, like they're going supplying it with vegetables, and salads and all the rest. So they'll be vested partners. There's another guy who produces raw milk locally. He's going to provide 30 bottles of milk. So it's not me running it for me, but it
Yeah.
creates another outlet that way.
Yeah, and it's nice to hear these kind of, like you say, partnerships are possible, and
Well,
it takes a lot out of you standing in a market, 3 days a
that's time,
week.
and then that's worry, and you're on your own with that. The
Mm.
reality is, like, if you think about it, and I'm very fortunate, like my dad and mum, like they're wonderful people. But Daddy is 92, like I suppose he's a lot older. I'm 44, so he grew up in a time when the whole farmers self-sufficient, and what farmers did was they sold their surplus to the local community, and the local community, whether it was the butcher or I mean, people might of a certain generation would remember, like on a Saturday night, the local ladies or Sunday morning would cycle into town with their 12 or 2 dozen eggs, and they'd use that then to buy something, they'd sell it to the grocer, he'd sell something back. There's that local model of producing food. Now, I'm not saying everyone does, but I guarantee if most of us here at food this evening, we don't really know, I'll probably say guaranteed Irish, but if it's based in your locality and it's providing, pick any young person that you know with a source of income, not their whole job, but then, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, it's a nice idea. You also, do you sell honey? Yeah, you have bees as well, don't you?
Yeah, yeah. Again, the honey's more for gifts. I have two hives, and they give about, well, I've a hive and a half. One's a hive, and the other's what's called a nuke. It's kind of a small hive. I'm breeding it for next year. It was over COVID. A local lady around the way, she took me under her wing and kind of trained me because I wanted to bring it into the school. It's not really practical on an insurance front. I found out since with bees and schools and stuff. Now I could do it, but you're always running the risk of someone getting stung or whatever. But so we'll see. We'll see. There is a way around it, but that was my thought process originally. But I love it. It's very mindful work. You have to be on point when you're with the bees. And they give like a big hive last year. Gave 65 jars of honey. The year before, gave
Mm.
70, and then I could use them in the house myself. And like they're a real. This goes back to what the land can give. Like they're a real precious gift out of the land of Leitrim. I think I'm only kind of
Mm.
conduit for kind of bringing it here. Now you could, but there is scope to have a honey business if I wanted. Like you could, the lady who did it, and she only did it around the way she has. Now she's retired now. Herself and her partner, who sadly passed away, they were like, I think they had 100 hives at one stage. I remember when we were wee boys, we were myself and my brother, like 1990 something, early 1990s, and we were playing football in the front lawn, and this big red cortina pulled up outside, and who like we were like, oh wow, because it was a lovely fancy car, and it was Dorina Allen from Ballymaloo Kitchens. And she was on the telly at the time. I don't know if like, back then, there wouldn't have been as much weird. She was like kind of, we were thinking we were dying fast for her, but she was looking for this lady because she would forget more about honey than I'd ever know. But she had a wonderful business built up. So there is scope on a farm to do that. The economics do add up. Like the 70 jars of honey, if I had one hive, let's talk about economics, 70 jars, if you sold them for what, a tenner a jar would be what, 700.
700.
So come back to maybe 600 or whatever, right? It doesn't cost, if you had 10 of them, it wouldn't be hard to do 10 hives over the summer. The April, September is the time. Would it be hard? You'd be talking giving maybe half a day a week to them. That because you only look at them once a week. And then you do that, and then that's an extra 6 grand, give or take, like either side 500. But that's an income you could have coming in on top. Like we all talk about these, and subsidies are fine, and I have no problem with accepting subsidies or getting grants, but they're a tap that you have no control over who turns on and turns off. So if you're relying on them solely, then and they start to drip, the drip starts to slow down a bit. You're going to be under pressure, and that's what will happen in time to come. Um, like people may not be aware of it, but there's a law coming through from Europe called the Nature Restoration Law, and it has many, many wonderful facets. But how it's implemented at a national level will have huge impacts on local communities. Like there's parts of it that are talking about returning, parts of the countryside to the state it was in maybe 60 years ago. And that'll devastate farming communities because you can't just do that overnight. So there
Mm.
has to be thought put into it. But this is what's coming. We have to work with it. We know the crack that's going on climate wise. We all have a duty to do it. But it's just, yeah, that's kind of,
Finding the balance of where it's locally.
yeah, that's just about.
Just because you mentioned the bottom line there a minute ago, does this type of farming work for you? Aside from, I know you say you have a part-time job, but you kind of are full-time farming, really. It's a busy farm as well. So, I mean, I know that you have your students and you're trying to, presumably a lot of your students are from similar type of land as you, because they're ag science students. And you're trying to say to them, look, it's not going to be intensive agriculture for you guys going forward, but are
Good
you able
point.
to say to them that they can pay their bills as well?
Absolutely. I wouldn't be at, you have a lot more money doing it this way than you would the other way. Now, I do want to make the point. My biggest limiting factor is time. Like if I had more time, I could be, you could really push production. Like, and I'm no genius. I'm basing this off a good friend, well, most of it, not all of it, but I have a good friend, Cahill Mooney's his name up in Heather Hill Farm. He's also an ambassador. Go to Cahill's YouTube page. Cahill will follow all that he does, and he's a woodwork teacher, though he never taught, a qualified woodwork teacher. Like he makes, and he tell you the truth, somewhere between 35 and 40,000 a year on 7 acres of land doing this type of farming. And he's not, I can guarantee it, he does. Now, I don't make as much as that because I don't push it, but I have other stuff coming on. And remember, everything I push, you have to pay tax because you have to pay your way, You're just trying to make it as manageable as possible. So I guarantee it absolutely you can. Now, you couldn't be telling them otherwise. In fact, I do tell them you can farm any way you want, lads. If you want to be spreading fertilizer on the ground that you have and close to waterways and trying to, push production and trying to keep a certain type of animal, you can do that, but don't be thinking you'll have as much money in your pocket as if you do it another way. Though, and this is about balance. I'm not 100% right. There's a certain social aspect that guys like to be farming like that. Like one of my wee cousins, he keeps pedigree textile sheep, right? There's, he loves it. He's just brilliant at it. He's just so good. He's a wonderful young fella. But I'd be very doubtful that the economics of it add up. Just looking on now, and maybe that's been unfair to him. But he loves showing them, and he loves all that goes involved with it, and that shouldn't be taken away either.
I think that's a really important point, is the bottom line isn't, is it worth it? Isn't always
Yeah,
about the actual kind of what's on your bank statement. It's also, everything from community to mental health to, like,
and the
like you say,
social
kind of what
aspect
you
of that
get
kind
out
of
of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like, I mean, we live in a time now where what is the bottom line? Like, what are the values you want your kids to have? Like, do you want to make, like I said below when I was chatting at that thing, that you could really push hard, right? And try and make €1 million. And you could do that myself. And I'd be doing it because I want my kids to be, looked after. But imagine dividing that three ways. And in 20 years' time, that'd be 300,000 each for one, but for argument's sake, right? Sure, it might only be a down payment on a house in 20 years' time. And all that would have gone into making that money, as opposed to maybe bringing them out and getting them involved in the farm and appreciating where they're from and the practice. And that's if they like it. I mean, they might not want to. I'm not trying to force the issue. Like, Jesus, I farmed when I was young, and then for maybe 20 years, I was away gallivanting and football and holidaying and whatever else was going on, which is
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
part of the business too for young people.
Living your 20s. So
Yeah,
before I
exactly.
go, I know there's one or two questions in, and if anyone has any questions, please click onto your chat box and write down your question. But is there any moment in your childhood or you yourself, a pivot moment where someone you were with or some story that you heard that made you know or recognize that you wanted to be on the land going forward for yourself? We can come
Um,
back to that question if you want.
No, there's loads of things. Like to be often, sometimes I'm always conscious of, like, life isn't Hollywood. Like, that moment you're talking about there doesn't really happen. But I can just think now of a picture of myself and my brother and my dad up at potatoes up in the far corner of the farm. It was this old, like there was no pictures back then. There might have been only a handful of pictures. I remember seeing that, and that feels good. It just feels right that you were doing it together. I can remember my uncle going over, Uncle Pat, he was a great, great man, going over with hay on his back to outfeed out with your cattle. And I just, like, I make a point now if I have time to do the same thing, even though I could hop in the wee gator I have and spin over. You're walking, you're feeling that. I mentioned a book to you earlier on. It's called The Cleanan's Tree by a local guy in Leitrim, Jerry Bowen, and there's some lovely stories in it about the connection to the land and the connection to farming. And I advise anyone who wants to get a Christmas present to get that. It's I don't know if it's for sale at shops, so I think it's just a very small production, and I'm not sure how it works. But it's called The Cleanan's Tree, Clainings. And what Clainings are is the afterbirth after a cow calves. And traditionally, what people do or did, they throw them up in a white thorn bush. And the idea being that by the time they decompose, that the calf was up and healthy and the cow would come back and calf. And it was an old tradition that was there going back hundreds and hundreds of years. So when you read that kind of stuff and you just know, like, we're only in the we're only in the, what would you call it, like, whatever, 2024 it is now. Like, and if you think back to 1975 or anyone that might be a bit older, what was going on then and what was driving it. And then,
Mm.
like, there was a lot of hardship back then and immigration and in the 80s, and all of these things kind of feed into your psyche. But people have been farming the farms of Ireland, the land of Ireland for a long, long time and, living off it. So I think it's important that we make sure that you can keep doing it for a long, long time in the future too.
Brilliant. So question here is from Chloe Wood. How many Dexters do you have out wintering?
So at the moment, I have three, four, six. So there's four cows, two heifers, and a bull. So that's what I have out at the moment. And then off them from last year, I have well from 2 years ago. So if you think I had four cows, so that would mean altogether four cows, four 2-year-olds, and then four weanlings, so to speak, if you follow me. So the four cows and two heifer weanlings are out, because they're going to be the herd for producing. And then I have two weanlings and four of last year's sorry, four two so I've seven out and six inside, but the six I have inside are four small weanlings, which will be just taken off their mothers maybe a couple of months ago, and two bullocks, which would be maybe 18 months old. And they're all going to go into the meat system because the four I kept last year, I done an interesting experiment, which worked really well. We have suckler cows as well. And 2 years ago, we had a lovely limousine bull calf that was bred out of almost a purebred limousine cow, though I kind of moving them out of the herd. But he was there, and I knew all his AI. He was out of a bull called Lodge Hamlet, which is very good trait. If anyone knows AI, it'd be one of the top end limousine ones. But he had very good maternal traits, so and very easy calving. So I put him as a calf onto the four Dexters, and they all calve perfectly fine. So there's four, I suppose, Lim-Dex cross calves out of them. Now bear in mind that these cows all had at least three, if not four calves, so you would never put them on heifers or second calvers. They were used to the calving or whatever. And
Mm.
someone's asking there, were the short or long? They were all long like Dexters.
Okay. And did you have to supplementary feed at all?
Oh, in the winter, yeah, you would. So
Yeah.
I give them hay and I give them, whatever. Now they don't eat an awful amount. Maybe a bale of silage a week. Them six cattle would eat, and they're well looked after with that regard. Now, again, what I would like to do next year is be a bit more smart and do some extended grazing. So basically, I close up the field they're in now. It's this lovely field that's in underneath the mountain. Close it up in July maybe, and don't let them back into it till maybe December. So there'll be a good bank of grass there, because even though they're light and they don't poach to the land, they're still eating it, fairly bare. So that's it.
So is it just hay or is it
No, it's silage and hay. Silage and
yeah,
hay.
okay,
Just
silage.
depends whatever I had. We actually made, if you remember back in the beginning of June, there was some really good weather, and there was a week, so we made a lot of hay, square bales of hay, and in fact, we made some really good kind of rough ground that would never normally go into hay, but we made some square bales out of that. There wouldn't be huge nutrition in it, but there's a sufficient amount. Like they have no calf on them for the winter. Sorry, they've been weaned. They just need to maintain themselves, and but the animal welfare is really important. Like
Mm.
if anything, I probably feed too much, but I'd rather that way than the other way.
And because you're an organic farm, is it mostly off your own farm, your silage, your hay, as you just
Oh,
said,
everything
silage?
will be,
Yeah.
yeah, everything,
So you
yeah, it
have
has
enough
to.
lower ground
Yeah,
to
well,
allow
that's
for
it.
that.
Like if you go back to it, I'm very fortunate. Like as you said, we've about 30 hectares of lower land ground, between myself and my dad, and so you're able to kind of close up ground and make extra hay and make extra silage. But remember, all of these things have a cost, and not just the monetary cost of making extra hay and silage. There's a balance there, so you don't want to be making too much either. If you follow me, it's
Mhm.
not. But you can sell. I mean, I could sell people to be ringing me the whole time looking for stuff. But well,
Yeah.
the whole time's probably an exaggeration, but regularly.
Because how does
Or
it, just so I understand, how does it work if you're with a commonage? I mean, obviously there's no
no, it's
inputs on
good.
a commonage anyway, but can it be a certified commonage, certified
No,
organic, or
no,
is it just
no.
assumed?
It's no, it's not. Yeah, that's where so basically, and this goes back to where the subsidies for people that aren't aware, though I presume most people are, they're all area based, right? So the more it used to be on a numbers base where you had animals and headage, and that was not good. But it was good if you had lots of them from a monetary point of view, but you ended up destroying the land you had. But it's on an area base, right? So to get a payment in organic payments, I think it's 300 euro per hectare is what you get up to a certain point. But the commonage doesn't come underneath that. So basically, you can be organic, you can use the commonage, the animals can stay organic, but the actual subsidy that you receive for organic payments doesn't come on the commonage. Even if everyone was on the commonage, now this is something I don't think if there's 9 shareholders on our commonage, I don't think even if we were all organic, could we get it, because it's such a vast. The way commonage works in our system is the land that abuts this particular part of commonage is there's nine townlands, nine, not nine townlands, nine landowners within that townland. But the next townland up the road might have 14 landowners, and they'd have 14 shares, but there'd be no, on the commonage, there'd be no delineation between
Yeah.
our commonage and, the next townland up commonage.
Unless you put the no fencing on everyone and it beeps as
Even with
they.
that, even with that. But then it becomes, remember, it's not just about the payment. It's not really like, you have to be doing it for the right reason. I mean, it's not like people kind of, and then look, and I'm not, as I said earlier on, I'm not oblivious nor adverse to taking pay subsidies if they're there. That's what they were there for. But they've actually created a system where the price of cattle and the price of sheep now are, they don't even, if you go back to pre-subsidy times, there would be taking inflation into account, that there wouldn't be at all comparable.
Yeah. Again, Chloe Wood has asked, have you thought about setting up a farm partnership with your nephews to spread the earnings and profits? We're looking at it in our own family currently.
I haven't, though it wouldn't be, it's crossed my mind. Like, I suppose the thing with land and all of that, it's kind of like, I definitely would see a situation where I would be encouraging them more to be involved. The partnership aspect does have drawbacks to it. I don't know enough about it, to be honest. That's
Yeah,
here there.
you're doing what works for you
But
at the
what I'm
moment.
doing, what I'm doing, they're doing well at it. But I do appreciate they need to have skin in the game if they're going forward. Like, as in making a sound, they're not going to become really rich after, but to make a solid addition to if they're part time. And I don't think there's anything wrong with being part time. In fact, I would encourage farmers to be part time, because socially it's good to get out. Like, your farm is great, but if you're on your farm all the time, it's not great either.
Yeah. I'm going to just ask you to, what was the surname of what was the name of the person who wrote that book again?
His name is Jerry Bowman, and the book is. Do you want me to type it in?
Bohan, yeah.
I actually bought it off him directly.
I don't know if it's Jerry Bohan or like that, but.
I'll have a look here. Are you chatting here? Sure, chat. Oh yeah, Jerry Bowman, yeah.
Yeah, is it like that?
It's called The Cleanings Tree. Now, I know you can contact him directly.
So it's got some nice cultural references to farming.
There's some lovely story. There's some but just it'll resonate with anyone anywhere. Like, it's just great. Good manager. It just resonates with what it's about, because we know in our hearts as farmers, and we're fortunate to be on the land that we're on. And we only have it for a certain amount of time. And you look what people had very little, we would think before, but there's a lot more in certain ways. Like, there's a lovely man up the road. I call into him as often as I have the honesty box. I call into him not near as often as I'd like to, but I do call into him on time and stop. And he remarked one time, I'd be talking about how we have a lot of time, how I think it's great now. And he goes, "That's right, James, but we don't have time to stop and talk and just, chat." And he's the type of guy you could talk to all day, but we're all rushing and racing. So you have to kind of think about that too. There's a balance.
Yeah. No, there's definitely, I agree with you there. So for those of you who do want to buy one of your turkeys, where can they find you?
I'm afraid they'll have to WhatsApp me here. I'll back in the old number. But the only thing is now, just to bear in mind, I graze them during the summer. So what does a turkey like? He likes dry weather. Wasn't an awful amount of that in the summer, but he likes warm weather, and he likes the bright. So I have a little machine called a gobbly-go, in which they can roost, and you move them. I didn't mention even about the holistic plant grazing, but you move them. You never let them bear the soil, so you move all the animals as regular as you can, and they put on weight. But then the drawback to that, it's not a massive drawback because the bird tastes lovely, is you have to kill them in September, because otherwise you'd have turkeys that'd be like ostriches by the time we got to Christmas, and you'd be out of fortune. But you kill them in September and you freeze them, and people think, oh, they're frozen, but it's not. It's really nice. And I think I have a gentleman here. I see my father-in-law logged on per page. He can attest that they're pretty nice.
Well, I suppose if you think about it, like you say, they're yeah, you're actually killing them probably when they've eaten really good mixed species. You're nutritious. You're not kind of supplementing, feeding them with grain in winter.
That's what happens in winter, because this is, well, whatever capitalism or you call it, they're whacked into a shed. I'm not saying how tight they're put into the shed, but they're not in the conditions that they like to be in. And they're fed grain, because there's nothing growing this time of year. They're not going to eat silage, And you wouldn't believe how quick they grow in the sun. Like they're
Mm.
just like wow. Um, and yeah, so yeah, I can definitely say that they're having from experience they taste nice. But I'm not. But the one thing is because they're frozen, I take them out of storage in December 22nd. The problem is I'm based up here outside Manorhamilton. I have a small Sligo, Bundoran, Manorhamilton. That's kind of the area that will have to be picked up in. If people wanted them, and that's a bit of a drawback if you're down in Cork or wherever. But find someone in Cork that might do it or something like that, or
Yeah,
wherever you're.
yeah. Yeah, I'd say they're probably quite nutrient dense anyway at that time.
Ah, there
So,
would be, yeah.
so
But
Mary
sure, it's
Cannon
your
has, sorry, Mary
yeah.
Cannon has asked here, can you talk about your PV panels on your shed?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. Hi, Mary, I forgot about them. So again, what would I say? PV panels, okay, so there's a massive push for renewables, right? So, and that to itself is good in a way, as long as it's managed properly. But on the shed, it's beside our house, and we built a new house in 2015, started 2015 and in 2017. And when we were building it, I always kind of said, wouldn't it be great to be able to supply yourself at least some of your own electricity? So I brought a cable from the house, which is 200 meters away, 10 square cable to the shed, and the power runs both ways. It brings power to the shed from the ESB box at my house, and then it brings power back from the solar panels, which were made. Now, only up until, so the solar panels, there were 16,000 euro at the time to put up. It was quite a lot to invest in, I'll not lie. But there'd be more now. I didn't do it grant aided. There'd be maybe 22 or 23,000 on the cost of things now to do it. And the grant is quite specific. So at the time, it was better to go at it and do it. And I was producing a lot of power in the summer. And it was that I didn't have an electric, I only had a standing charge the whole way from April to October. But because our house was new, and because it didn't require a lot of heat in the summer, it wasn't really. I was sending a lot of electricity free back to the grid. Our heavy time is in the winter, so you're talking about like because we've been near to water system, it was using a lot of power in the winter, but sure, I wasn't making any solar panel. But fortunately, since last year, they brought in what's called a I don't even know the name, a buyback scheme. So I think they're paying me 23 cents per kilowatt. It's one company, I can't just think it's poor gosh, but I don't know. There's different companies doing it. They're best ones at the time, and it's around the 23 cents. And I'm not sure what it is now, maybe it's 46. It's about half price, but in the summer, I'm making way too much. So they're giving 23 cents per kilowatt as a surplus, and that's building up and up and up. And then in the wintertime, that comes off my bill. So even though I'm not completely free in the wintertime, you're definitely going the right way. Coupled with that, it's on the shed. And because I didn't get the grant, if you get the grant to go down the Thames, all the power has to be used on the shed. It has to be, it works very well for dairy people. But there isn't a huge demand on a suckler cow shed to have that. So it's a fixed asset because it's on the shed, so you use it there as well, and it works well. It'll pay itself off in about 8 years. There's a 25-year lifespan, so that's what they say. So I mean, look, it's a step in the right direction. I mean, the real thing is let's use less power. Is really where we got to go. We got to be more smart in how we use things. Reduce, reuse, and recycle. I mean, we've been hammered into us for a long time, but we have to start doing that. Like that's, and I'm trying to do that on the farm, but bit by bit we'll get there.
Great, thanks. So Chloe Wood has asked another Dexter question. Have you noticed whether they eat gorse?
Good. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can you talk about the PV panels? Thanks, James. Thank you, Gregory.
Sorry, another
Dexter,
Dexter question. Have you noticed whether they eat gorse?
the gorse is the yellow flower. Yes, wins we call them in Leitrim. Yeah.
What do you call it?
Wins, WHINS.
Oh, I never heard that.
Yeah, I'll come up to Leitrim to you here.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can't say they have. There will be no gorse on the commonage. There is one field where I have gorse, but if they're eating the gorse where they are there, it would be great. But it's gorse is kind of it's very thorny. Now I'm not saying that there isn't some nutrient value in it. I do know it's a great. It'll only grow in dry land. It's great for nitrogen fixation. Like it's the same as clover. It works and the alder tree. It's the exact same principle. So I will put it in. But the problem with gorse is it's not invasive, but it'll just
It
take
colonizes.
over,
Yeah.
It'll colonize. Yeah.
It takes over a bit. Sean Kelly has asked, what do you think about agroforestry, veganic farming, and rewinding?
I'd say it's rewilding.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. What do you think? Yeah, what do you think about eating less meat for your health and biodiversity? Let's start with
Yeah.
agroforestry. What do you think about
Where do we
agroforestry?
start? Agroforestry. So, as we were explaining what it is, agroforestry is basically keeping your animals on the land and planting trees. So, often what happens is and there's a variety of ways you can do it, but you can plant them in tree lines, often off contour to catch the water as it flows down. And there's an excellent farmer for nature ambassador, Clive Bright, who's much more experienced in talking about it than I am. But I definitely see place for it because, in many ways, if you can create an outdoor shed in effect in the space of maybe 10 years, you can keep your animals out and they're healthy, like, and all the rest. So I definitely would be in favor of organic for agroforestry. Veganic farming is a new one to me. I haven't heard it before. Maybe it's a
Yeah.
misprint, is it?
I'm not too sure. Maybe it's
Organic?
arable farming only, but rewilding, any viewpoints?
Yeah, what's rewilding, like, and how it's done is really important. It links back to what I mentioned earlier about the nature restoration. In theory, it would have some very good benefits. I mean, nature will be what will solve a lot of the planet's crisis from a point of view, pulling back all that carbon, right? Um, I do think how it's done is really important. I mean, the family farm, small family farm, which has been used to support people, and for small family, there's lots of people who've done very well, come from, successful at a small family farm. If the rewilding was to come into it like as a top-down approach and not be voluntary, and it's going to create huge problems. As a process, I don't know enough about it. I mean, I do know there's a huge issue with deer at the moment, in the sense because they don't have a predator, an apex predator to take them out of it. Not only take them out of it, you hear me, but to control the
Yeah.
population, they've just taken over and they've caused huge problems. So I mean, what looks after that? I mean, lynx, I think, was one thing that's mentioned. I know the wolf and the bears, and then you're kind of thinking, well, is there space for that in Ireland? And where do you do it? I just don't know enough about it. But I do.
Yeah,
My
and do you
most
know
important
what?
thing.
That's okay. We're here to talk about your farm anyway, so we don't expect you to
I know,
have
but
every answer to everything as
but it's
well.
good. But it's good to have a conversation. I'd love if someone
Yeah,
wants to talk here. I don't whatever. I don't mind people
yeah.
contributing. It's not. It's not. It's good to
Uh,
have these conversations.
as poor Lydon says, lovely turkeys. I had one of them a week ago. The best yet. Sounds like you have your
Yeah.
propaganda running away with you in the background.
You see,
Your
I
campaign
plant them.
line. Your
Yes,
campaign
yes,
line is
yes,
there.
yes.
So,
Very glad. Yeah.
just I know we're coming into the last kind of 10 minutes or whatever, but I just want to ask you, so if you were to start advising another farmer with your type of land, what are the main things to consider if they wanted to include more nature on their land, or what are the first steps to take? What would it be?
Oh, where do you start? There's loads of things. Like, I'm often listening to myself talking and thinking, "This is good. Jesus isn't he a mighty man?" But I've done it with a lot of support, and I've also done it over a long period of time. I don't mean, what I mean. It doesn't just happen overnight. You take one thing at a time. So ponds are a lovely thing for creating biodiversity, and they're not hard to. You look at somewhere on the land that would be easy to put a pond into. If it's somewhere like the water will gather, so to speak. Planting trees is a wonderful idea. Riparian zones or riparian margins, which would be there's and if anyone that's in the acre scheme, there are directions. So if you have a water course on your farm, you can come back 3 meters from the water course and put up a stock-proof fence. If you've got sheep, you got to put up sheep wire. If you've got cattle, you can get away with just cattle wire. And what happens if 3 meters inside of that goes back to, I suppose, rewilding, as Sean mentioned earlier on, for the 5 years of the scheme, anyways. But it ends up, you'll end up having scrub. You can actually plant trees in that zone as well. So there's huge benefits to that. I think getting out onto other people's farms and just feeling this, like, and observing stuff. Like, we all have a, what's the word? It's inside us. It's to know what's right. Do what's right for you on your farm, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. But as my father says, just there's a job to be done. Just go at it. Like, doesn't really matter too much. And if you do it with the right reasons, then most of the time you won't be too far off the mark.
What do you feel are the biggest challenges you had along the way?
As I said,
Nothing
time is a
obvious. Yeah.
well, no. I'm sure every challenge is only something to be overcome. I do find time is a problem. Not a problem, but like, we're brought up into this mindset that you have to, acquire as much as you can to be safe going forward, and money and everything else. But and you get into that, it's indoctrinated in you from a young age. It's just
Mm.
the way it is. Like, for a lot of people, I'm not saying everyone's like that, but so I think kind of changing your mindset a bit from that is important. Don't get me wrong. I'm well aware it's easy to talk about, when you are reasonably more than above the poverty line that it's good. But I am aware also that if you keep going in the one direction, then maybe I could have gone down that road. It takes a bit of time to turn the ship slowly, you know.
And where would you go? Where would you recommend that people go for support and advice that are looking for kind of to change their way of thinking around farming towards nature and towards nature-friendly farming?
Sure, listen, what you've going on here is just the bee's knees. Pardon the pun, it's just brilliant. Like, I mean, I'm all like, he hears me on about it again. He's probably got a barn order against me. But Tommy Early is one of the original ambassadors for nature, and Tommy will be based outside of Rigna, outside it's in Roscommon, but really he's kind of an honorary Leitrim man at this stage where it's located. And Tommy will just do so much good stuff. And because I went and watched 5 years ago, it would have inspired me just to go at stuff and to surround myself and go up to listen to him talk. Like he gave a talk one time at a farmers meeting I was at, and I just, you hang on every word kind of thing, you know. And the
Mm.
idea then is go and do it yourself, and then if you do it for the next people coming along. So farmer for, and you also have a wonderful. I have to mix up the names. Is it from the Horse's Mouth? Is that the one that you run?
Hmm.
Where an ambassador, and you have a lot of ambassadors now, over 100, I think, is it, or close to it?
91, yeah.
91, yeah. So they can, that they get a few quid, I think, too. But if they're close by to where you're based, apply to the Farmer for Nature to get funding for them to go out and visit you. Not that we're anyway experts, like by all means, but you're kind of going the right direction. So that's a lovely program you've gone on. All the videos that are there, and it doesn't have to be here. You can go out and just get online. There's loads of good stuff. But I do think the most important thing is find your tribe, surround yourself with the people that kind of fill your heart and float your boat, or whatever way you want to call it. And then you just keep going that way. And no one's going to get it 100% right. But yeah,
Mm.
I think it's just great. What you're doing here, I want to call you Barbara again, but I can't. What you're doing here,
Thanks,
Bridge,
John.
what you're doing here is it's just amazing, and really, really, it's just wonderful now. I would call this. I mean, Chagas, and there's some really great guys in Chagas. We have a local Chagas office in Manor Hamilton. Like, couldn't speak highly enough about them because they're rooted in the area. They're rooted in what we're doing,
Mm.
and they care about the farmers on the ground. I also think more female farmers is really, really important. I'd always be trying to encourage that because and we all have a female aspect to ourselves. It's Mother Nature at the end of the day. It's not kind of more. But
Hmm.
so that's it.
Yeah, being as inclusive as possible and getting your information as far as possible. David Cotter said, thanks, James. Dexys are great. Ponds trees. Looking forward to one of your turkeys. So there you go. What about
Ah,
nut
nice one.
trees? Filberts. Any
Uh,
thoughts? Any experiences?
who's asking about nut trees?
David Cotter.
On someone else, Chloe's question there as well. I do know a bit about nut trees, but I do know, and we have some lovely hazelnuts on this piece of land I mentioned earlier on. But they're kind of they're in depletion a wee bit. It takes a lot of work, and it takes it's definitely something. There's a lovely farm down in Fermanagh called Gub Farm, I think. Get online, look it up on YouTube. He planted a lot of nut trees. It's something I would love to go and see too. I just, I think I might be getting the P45 at home if I start going on about being a nut farmer. I'd say. But
Um, Chloe has asked, are MPWS looking for other farmers to trial the no fence collars and the conservation grazing capacity? We would like to try them. Any?
yeah, I just put up my numbers there. Some people are asking for some turkey, so if you want to text me there or WhatsApp me, you can get one surely. Yeah, and sure, look, I'm a big into win-win situations. The National Parks and
Yeah.
Wildlife do this wonderful scheme called the Agri-Ecology Scheme. It was my Chagas advisor that told me about it. So it's the Agri-Ecology Scheme, yeah. So how I came up with the scheme myself, and this happened 3 years ago, I was reading online about these things being trialed in Scotland, and any farmer can apply to the agroecology scheme to do anything, okay, as long as it's based in improving the environment or improving the farm, but they all go hand in hand. So I seen this being trialed in the Highlands in Scotland. I was looking up at Lovely Bemp and I was like, well, if we can do it in the Highlands, we can do it in North Leitrim. Put in an application, and that's where the ball started rolling. So 3 farmers were introduced in the first year, and we were funded to do it. In year two, I think up to 50 farmers were taken on board. Now, these particular collars were initially used for goats in Norway. So they're actually more suited, and they're different sizes. They're more suited to kind of sheep and goats. So there's some farmers trialing it on sheep. Now, I do know they have, and cattle, obviously, and I'm not sure about goats, actually, if there is goats in it, probably is. So there was 50 in year two. So I don't know. I would get on to Agri Ecology, National Parks and Wildlife, get the email, whack them off an email. I'd say that yeah, they'd be more than happy to get people involved, because they do work. Now, I will say they're not a magic cure, right, for grazing. So, for example, they give me great peace of mind that anyone that knows Dexter's, they're quite wild, but they give me great peace of mind when they're up there. I know where they are. But I do believe that the shock on them isn't sufficient to deter some animals. It's like, the way if you ever touch an electric fence, I think it's a very weak electric fence pulse. Herd instinct will always override the fear. So if someone, if they bolted her for some reason or whatever, I don't think they'd stop at the thing. The GPS also wouldn't be exact in the sense, I might put the boundary at X, but the actual boundary when they get the beat might be X plus 2 meters over that way, which is fine on a 150-hectare site. But I have tried it on the low ground with Dexter's and it didn't work. Now, there is talk that it may work with dairy cattle. It's about docility. A lot of the problems would be I train them before they go up, so I can pick out the cattle that just it won't work on. But don't be thinking like as I remember thinking at the start, this is great. Imagine I could use the up there, and I know where everything is. I can move them around and all the rest. But animal welfare is the most important thing,
Mm.
and land welfare and farmer welfare and all the rest. But you can't be kind of just moving them about. It just they're not. It's not a be all and works for everything. But they are a benefit for peace of mind and for generally keeping them within where you need to go.
Interesting, yeah. About agroforestry, do you think more trees around Leitrim could improve soil drainage and overall soil quality? Is planting more trees on agricultural land in Leitrim feasible?
I get it. Fair play to you. But it's all about the type of trees, right? Is the big thing. I do think it's feasible to create. My farm could be just as productive if I planted, from a grown grass point of view, if I planted trees on the good quality land, as long as I was able to grow to move the animals, and as long as if you didn't need to go in and make silage or hay, like generally the trees are planted in rows and they're not planted in straight rows. As I said, the best way is to do it off contour, which basically means kind of on the side of the hill so they're getting the water as it flows down. So I do think there is space for that, but we have a huge problem in Leitrim when it comes to trees. The whole area has been, in North Leitrim especially, it's been overly taken by trees for sickle spruce, which is like this monoculture. They're packed tight together. They're completely destroyed the ecosystems. And I don't. It's not my place to be talking about it here, but that is not the type of trees that you need. Is there enough agricultural land to do this type of trees? I definitely think on a small scale. One issue I have with it, and you can still get your payments on agroforestry land, like your farm payments, just all the rest. But the land usage type changes from mere agricultural land to forestry land, and I don't know how that affects land down the line for selling it or passing it on or for claiming. I don't know what will happen in a few years' time with things and all. So there is that issue with it. Did I answer that
Just be,
question? Yeah,
yeah,
I would
just be aware of the pitfalls.
definitely going to improve soil drainage. I mean, definitely could improve nutrient flow. Like if you think about planting your riparian zone, and so basically a riparian zone is you have water flowing at the side, and you plant your trees here. They're stopping all the nutrients. So if you're putting out fertilizer, they're catching all of that before it flows down into the river. It's all a cycle, and they're sucking the water up, and it's going back up. And don't forget, they're sucking down carbon to base the band, and they're creating fungal networks down there. I had to get fungal in there because I know I can big fungal expert there. And yeah, like I mean, there's so much going on. And then so we only know the tip of the iceberg. Like this is we're only trying to. If you feel that it's right, you do it.
Yeah, and David Cottle says agri-forestry land gets paid the full
Yeah,
organic payment.
that was
But
a
like you
big one now for
say,
getting
I
across
mean,
the line.
people don't have to go full forestry or full woodland. They can just do it around their edges or their boundaries or along their riparian
Yeah,
zones.
and
I mean,
don't go back to what I said earlier on with the three legs of the stool. Your economic has to be sound, your environmental, but there's also social. Like and especially in Leitrim, the notion of planting trees is it's a contentious issue, right? So if you start planting trees in your land, and it just has to be the right type of trees for the right function for the right reasons, like the likes of oak, and you start off with your pioneers, your alder, but things like uh, like the ash really is taking an awful hit, but the ash dieback now is starting, and I'm doing a few studies myself on it, just anecdotally trying to collect seeds of trees that are solid and sound, and hopefully they'll be okay. But there's another one. It's just like the name escapes me now. What's it called? It's a cedar, is it? But there's a wonderful agroforestry up in Lough in County Armagh. There was a guy, or a wonderful fellow, Professor Jim McAdam out of Queens. They've been trialing it for like 25 years, and it works really well up there. And then you've got a crop that you can harvest every, it depends on the type of tree, of course, but that there's a certain income coming off as well. But you have to look, I suppose the biggest thing is how will the decisions we make now affect our great grandkids or our great great grandkids? Like I'm not worried about my kids, but if I go planting trees in that field, you really have to think about the type of trees. Will they be able to live in the area, and will it be of benefit to them or will it not? And like the Chinese proverb, society's in a good place when old men plant trees that they'll never sit under kind of comes to mind, but it has to be the right type of tree in the right place.
Okay, so excellent. James, listen, we've come to the end of our hour, so thank you so much for your time and your generosity. We've all learned lots about North Leitrim and what's going on up there. But if anyone missed part of this or would like to share it with anyone, it's on will be on our YouTube channel, possibly by the end of tomorrow. And then James has also put his number up there if anyone would like to buy a turkey for a very nutrient dense turkey that has grazed the
omega-3s and 6s coming out the here, yeah.
So it'd be a great addition to your table, and if you're up in that part of the world. Do join us. We hope to have a Ask the Farmer Q&A session every second Tuesday of the month. Our next one is with Bruce Thompson, who is a dairy farmer with a keen interest in dung beetles in January. So details of that will be sent out to everyone who registered here. And otherwise, happy Christmas from us all at Farming for Nature. I can't believe I'm saying that. I still feel like I'm about a month or two behind Christmas, but I'm catching up slowly that it is soon. James, thank you so much for joining us, and I will not call you John again. So, but thank you. That was really interesting.
Bridget.
And we'll see you
more than
again
welcome,
soon.
and thanks for all the lovely comments too, and thanks for everything for showing up, and just go at it.
Go at it. Exactly. Last words. Go at it. Okay, good. See you, James. Thank you.